Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a Friday Reads video, which is, wow, two in like a few weeks of each other, right? Or maybe it's been more like a month. I can't remember. So anyway, I just want to quickly go through the books that I've read since basically the beginning of August. The first of which was a book that I had been reading for months and finally finished up, and that's These Truths by Jill Lepore. This was a nonfiction history of the United States from the founding, well, even before the founding, from like the 1600s on to present day. It really it takes an approach to history where she's talking a lot about not so much the white perspective or the white European perspective of the history, but a lot from the minority perspective. So from African people who were brought to North America as slaves, and then through the generations became Americans in this country, and all the ins and outs of that, and how basically the United States wouldn't be what it is today without their labor and their participation in our country, and also, you know, how European colonization of North America impacted Native Americans and First Nations people, and then the immigrants that came to this country after the United States government was formed and all of that. So it really was an overview, so nothing was too in-depth, but it really was from a different perspective than what history is normally given to us here in the United States. And I found it fascinating and really useful context for where we are today in the United States. It's very, very readable. It is long. It's over 700 pages. There's a lot of end notes at the end for further reading or more information about where she sources her materials. But it's really, really excellent history of the United States. So I would very much recommend it to anyone who wants to know more about sort of the context around our where we are today in the United States. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and that was The Book of Essie by Meghan Maclean Weir. This is a fiction book about, I don't know if it's classified YA or not. The main protagonist, the main character, Essie, is 17 years old. She has been brought up her whole life in a very conservative religious family who are being filmed for a reality TV show a la the Duggars type of a thing, although she goes to regular school. She's not homeschooled, but she has 3 or 4 older brothers and an older sister, and we come into the story when Essie is 17. She's telling the story, and we don't really know what is going on, but you get a feeling that something is not right with this scenario. So we start to get the picture of what's going on from Essie's perspective. We then have 2 other narrators, and so you have chapters from each of the characters' perspectives. The second character is Rourke, an 18-year-old boy in Essie's high school, and Liberty, a reporter who is interviewing Essie for the show, basically. So I found this really fascinating. It was a very plot-heavy story, so it kept you engaged, kept you going. I wouldn't say it's not obviously high literature, but it's very engaging, really interesting story, and much darker than what I thought it was going to be when it first started. And I would say that there is abuse in this book, and it's not fun to look at all, although it doesn't get explicit about the abuse, but you know the abuse has happened. And not only from 2 of the characters, 3 of the characters, there's just a lot of abuse in this book, and so it could be a difficult read for people, so I would just throw that out there if that's something that you're not interested in reading about. But if you are fascinated with these reality TV shows that sort of follow these religious families, or if you liked the book Educated, I think that you should give The Book of Essie a try. I really thought it was an excellent audiobook. And I will say also that the audiobook has a different audio narrator for each of the voices in the book. So that was another really good aspect to the story. I then finished my first book in translation for Women in Translation Month, and I read The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. And this was just a sweet little book about, from a cat's perspective. The cat's telling the story. The cat's name is Nana, but he is a boy, and he is found as a stray who's been hit by a car by a young man, and the young man brings him into his home and nurses him back to health, and they form a relationship. But then Nana's owner, for some reason that we're not told in the beginning, has to get rid of Nana. So he starts to look for a friend or a family member who will take Nana in and take care of Nana. And so Nana and his human companions start to go on these trips all around Japan trying to find Nana a new home. And it's just a very sweet story, humorous, really nice light read. It was only a little over 200 pages, so it was a very quick read and just something fun to sort of cleanse the palate. I then read another translated book, although not women in translation, a woman written book. This is The Stranger by Albert Camus, translated from the French, and this is obviously a classic of literature. It's a novella, and it was on my list of classics that I'm trying to read through, and I was not a fan of this book. So it's telling the story of a man who is really sort of not very friendly, very standoffish, really doesn't connect well with other humans. He has, right from the beginning that his mother is in a sort of a nursing home or an old person's home, and he works in the city, and he feels some guilt about putting his mother in this home, but not really. He doesn't really have any friends, and you sort of follow him over the course of several months. What happens to his mother, what happens to him at work. He gets sort of wrapped up with some people in his neighborhood, and maybe some of the people he's wrapped up with are the unsavory types, and then he ends up doing something wrong, and then it's the fallout from that. And I don't want to talk about it anymore because I don't want to spoil it, even though it is a classic. It's been around a long time and probably everybody knows what it's about. But I just, the main character was not, I couldn't connect with. And I mean, I know he's not supposed to be a likable person, but I just didn't care. I was just bored. Let's put it that way. I was just bored throughout this book. I didn't care what happened to him. I didn't care what happened to his mother. I didn't care what happened to his girlfriend. I didn't care what happened to the people he was, hanging around with. So, yeah. Not a fan of The Stranger by Albert Camus. Sorry about that one. And then the last book that I've completed so far in August is The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. This is another one I listened to on audio. So this is the story of, I'm so bad with character names. I've already forgotten his name. Pat Peebles, who, when we first meet him at the beginning of the story, is in a mental institution. His mom comes and basically gets him out of the mental institution and brings him home to live at home. And Pat's goal is to basically get his life together, get his mental health together, get his physical health together so he can win back his wife, who we find out in dribs and drabs he had some sort of breakup with, or he's basically, he calls it a part-time. So they're apart from each other, and he hopes to improve himself enough so that he can be reunited with his wife and go on to live a happy life. So he, like I said, his mom brings him home, and then it's all about Pat's trying to regain his mental health, trying to improve himself physically. He's working out 8, 10, 12 hours a day. It's about his relationship with his father and his brother, and into this, basically their relationship centers around Eagles football. So National Football League, American football, and the Philadelphia Eagles, they're huge fans in their family, and it's their relationship sort of centers around football. There's some other characters. Pat becomes, I don't know if I can use the word friends, but he starts to have a relationship with this woman down the street, and Tiffany, and they run together and they work out together, and they've both have experienced mental health issues, and so they find connection in that way. But Pat is not interested in her romantically because he is all about getting back together with his wife, Nikki. It's told in a humorous way. Matthew Quick is, I've never read anything by him before, but I understand he's considered a humorous writer. I found the story okay. It was nothing great. Like I said, I listened to it on audio and it held my attention. But the thing that I found that kept yanking me out of the story and sort of irritating me was Pat's constant sexist and misogynist language. His brother and his father are very, his father is, I thought, abusive to his mother and just a complete shithead. And I would have kicked his ass down the street way early on in the story. So he bugged me. And just the way that the men in this book talk about the women in this book, I found it highly, highly frustrating. Like, even the therapist character did things that I thought, what therapist would do this? Like, it just didn't ring true to me at all. And for the sexist and misogynistic language, like, I tried to be like, okay, this is being written as from the man's point of view, and I just was like, it rang it was very jarring, and I just thought this book was very clearly written 10 years ago or more. Like, it hasn't aged well, is what I'm going to say. I don't think it has aged well. So I was not a huge fan of the Silver Linings Playbook. I know there's been a movie made of it and all that, but I wasn't a fan. Even the way that the mental health issues were portrayed was not something that I really thought was appropriate at all. There's a lot of violence in this book, and I don't think it was handled very appropriately. It's treated all as a big joke, and nobody ever has to really be forced to deal with it in any kind of realistic way, I didn't think. That's just my opinion. Okay, so what am I reading currently? I'm currently reading a book for the BookTube Prize, so I can't talk about that. I'm reading another book for Women in Translation, and that is Voices from Chernobyl by Svetlana Alexievich. And this book obviously won the Nobel Prize in 2015, and I believe Britta Bowler's Nobel Prize Women's Reading Group has already read this book, and I missed it at that time, but I have been very interested to read it. This is a nonfiction oral history all about the Chernobyl disaster. I've started reading it. I read the first, basically prologue last night, and this is going to be a rough one. I think it's going to be really hard. Really terrible things happen to these people, but I don't know. I was in 7th grade when Chernobyl happened, so I think I was 12 or so. It would have been 12. So I remember that it happened, but I didn't know any of the details, so I'm interested to learn more. And already just the prologue, I think the writing style, this oral history style, is really, really my kind of book, so I'm looking forward to continuing on with that. And then obviously I'm still reading Barkskins by Annie Proulx. My buddy read with Natalie, that's still ongoing, and my buddy read with Sean for the Best American Short Stories is ongoing. But I also picked up the next book in the J.D. Robb series that I have to read, and this is Leverage in Death. So I just felt like some sort of no-brainer suspense, romance, futuristic stuff just to, relax this weekend. So I'm going to be working on that too. When I get a little too, note on there. When I get a little too depressed from Chernobyl, I will read my J.D. Robb. So that's it. That's my Friday reads. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you found some good books to read this weekend. I'll talk to you later.